All right, welcome to House of Champions. YouTube friends, drop in your comments and your questions in the chat and make sure you smash the like and subscribe buttons as we review the weekend's crazy football in action across Europe and beyond. I'm joined by my very good friend, Jonathan Johnson over in Paris. JJ, how you doing, man?
Yeah, doing well, thanks. And yourself? Late start, but so much good football today. It feels like it's blasted by.
Yeah, it has been a little bit of a crazy weekend. The clock's also changed here in the United States, so it's getting dark outside. I've got one eye on the Seville Derby as we round up the action this weekend. But let's begin with Serie A, JJ. It's obviously been incredible to watch the games going on this weekend, but one that just finished was Juventus getting the victory over Inter. Rabiot getting that opening goal. Fagioli will give him credit for that second goal. It did deflect off Gosens before it went into the back of the net. But Juventus, not a shot in that first half. Not a shot on target in the first half, but in the second half, a completely different team. And I will say this, JJ, now they're getting healthy again. Juve look like they mean business.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I kind of feel like, trying to find the positives from this performance and result kind of leads us into the argument of potentially giving Allegri a bit more time and actually buying into what he's been saying since the beginning of the season, that Juve's campaign is really only going to start once the FIFA World Cup break is over. And I mean, while there is a bit of credence to that, also at the same time, it does make you kind of feel when you see this kind of performance that Juve could have done a lot better in some of their situations earlier on in this season. I mean, don't get me wrong. They really got up for this game. I think the second half was particularly impressive. Like you mentioned, first half, they did look, a bit shy in front of goal, but Inter, they're not easy opponents, and this could really set up, sort of the second half of the season very nicely, especially with regards to how that, European qualification, shakes out eventually. But I don't know. I'll flip it back to you. I mean, do you think that we just got a glimpse of what Juve perhaps should have been like at times, since the beginning of the season? Because it feels like we've been coming on here week in, week out, absolutely slating Juve for these dreadful displays. And I feel we've been justified in doing that. But then they produce this kind of result. I don't know whether it's more down to Juve actually performing up to the standards that they should have been, or Inter, just being well and truly not at the races, once more. Because at the beginning of the season, they kind of looked similar to how they looked in this game.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, really. This game was obviously an interesting game. And I will say this, JJ, when you look at this weekend after what we've just gone through with the Champions League, there were some crazy results this weekend. Very difficult to predict. Obviously, for bettors out there like myself, not easy to win money this weekend because of the surprising results, late goals, confusing results, interesting team selections and things like that. But with a Juventus team that has been a wounded animal for a large part of that Champions League campaign and certainly the domestic campaign as well, getting players back healthy is always going to change the dynamic. And, Nigel talked about it on the show in the preview of the weekend, getting players back healthy in the training ground, how important it is for the chemistry. And I can only imagine for Juve, it's an absolute boost. You see a Chiesa coming back, obviously it's going to help you, and it boosts morale and around the locker rooms, the jokes start to flow again. And then all of a sudden that translates out to performance. What I did notice from this Juventus side, though, they did have it against PSG in some way. They had a great desire in this game. They had a great passion, and you could tell that the fans were feeding off that. The players were feeding off the fans, and the fans were feeding off the performance from the players. It was a great mixed sort of atmosphere, and I love to see that from a Juve side because we're so familiar to seeing them perform like that. I thought there was 2 or 3 players who really stood out. One in particular was Philip Costa. He seems like such a fantastic pickup for them, but on the Inter side of things, I'd love to hear it from all the fans who are out there watching right now, the viewers who are tuning in. Let us know in the comments what you thought about the game. But Inter really disappointed in the final third. They were poor. And maybe it's me being a bit too critical of Inter offensively and not saying how well that Juve defended. There was a purpose in the performance from Juve today. Allegri lives again, and clearly Juventus maybe know something that we don't know, JJ, because they seem to be sticking by Allegri. They seem to be happy with the way things have gone for him, and the performance today was a good one, and you could tell the players were playing for him.
Yeah, but also perhaps there's an element of there not being any choice as well. We know it's well documented that Juve, have financial concerns. They've obviously just dropped out of the Champions League as well. They still have a shot at European glory in the Europa League, but also at the same time, it's not really the same kind of windfall they'll be looking at financially. But something is better than nothing. And I do think that there will be a collective sense that everybody needs to salvage, what best they can of the remainder of this season. And that goes for Allegri as well, because Allegri going back, when you go back to a club, especially one where you've had as much success as Allegri had in his first spell there is a massive risk that you undo everything that you've sort of achieved, all memory of that. And that would make it very difficult for him getting the same kind of caliber of jobs moving forward. I'm not going to say it would completely put him out of the job market, if he was to get sacked by Juve, but it would make some of those bigger clubs in Italy less likely to look at him. Certainly, I think, would probably rule him out of consideration for a job outside of Italy. So it's as much in his interest to turn things around as it is for those players as well. And yes, there is that argument that, they have been missing certain key players. Chiesa only just coming back to fitness now. Pogba, we won't see him until 2023. But, I do feel there is an element as well that Juve, his players have sort of let him down at times, but I also think that his tactical selections have also been quite, bewildering at times in certain match situations. Definitely got it right for this one, but I think there's a long way to go before we say that Juve have completely turned this around. But their position does look a bit rosier now. They're in the European positions and looking towards those Champions League qualification spots.
Hey, JJ, before we move on to the Rome Derby, just want to touch upon the fact that the World Cup is coming up. Italy are not performing in the World Cup. Then there's also a couple of week break before Serie A continues early on in January. How important will that spell be for getting players back healthy, for getting players a rest, but also getting players, ready to rock and roll when January hits for a club like Juventus to really make a push for the top four?
I think it'll be hugely important, certainly for some other clubs. I've got something to pick your brains on in a second as well, related to that. But I think, for some of these Italian clubs, I mean, Napoli, it's just going to be a question of looking after their star men, making sure that they don't get sort of too bent out of shape with such a long period out of the game. And I think it's going to be quite interesting because for some of these clubs where they have a lot of players who are not going to be involved in the World Cup for one reason or another, there's going to be a lot of those in Italy. It's almost kind of getting a taste of what we see year in, year out from the Bundesliga when they have that winter break installed into the calendar. And obviously, as somebody who's experienced that in the past, do you think there's a danger of this perhaps extending a bit too far? This break from action for some of the clubs and actually getting some of their players back into shape off the back of the World Cup break is going to be really, really difficult to remobilize, because I think we were talking about it in the show's chat group on WhatsApp, how there is still going to be that winter break in the Bundesliga as well, whereas there are going to be other leagues that go straight back in, have that sort of festive, fixture flurry as well.
Seems unfair, really, when you consider the fact that you would have a winter break extended for certain leagues compared to others. But I will say this, though, the Bundesliga doesn't come back until the 20th of January, which is giving players enough time to recover from a World Cup. It's a 2-month break for the Bundesliga before they then pick up business again, which is just, in my mind, just unthinkable. You have a 2-month break before you come back. I don't know what to expect when you do return. I can only imagine it's going to be good for the players. I think obviously you'll be able to focus on a World Cup. Players will be able to take a break. You'll be able to have a nice time off if you're not involved in the World Cup, and then you can enjoy a good Christmas, and then you go back into a preseason, and then you go back into the season. There's no rush. So I'm okay with that. But it is going to be very interesting to see how other leagues handle that. The Premier League is just absolutely insane. They go straight back in on the 26th of December, if I'm not mistaken. France is early January as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No. There is
late December?
28th. They've come up with a special festive sort of French Boxing Day, even though it won't be on Boxing Day equivalent.
It's absolutely madness. So I don't really know what to expect, what's good and what's not good. But one thing's for sure, the Italians and certainly a lot of players who are playing in Serie A will be able to benefit. And I can only imagine Juve getting players back healthy in particular will be massively important here. Great comment coming from Rafa. He says, Allegri could have 1 year mid-season break. His tactics will still be tired and stale. Today's result doesn't disguise how bad he is, but a massive, massive result it was for Juventus. Thank you, Rafa, for your comments. Keep your comments coming, everybody out there who's tuning in to House of Champions. It's the Enjoy with Jonathan Johnson. Let's turn attention to the Rome Derby. Lazio getting the 1-0 victory in the Derby. Felipe Anderson on the 29th minute, his third goal of the season. Pretty poor from Ibanez, just completely lacking composure, losing his mind in a big situation and losing the game in the end. Roma were poor in this game, JJ. Only 8 shots, 2 of them on target. Just really disappointing from Rome altogether. Lazio move up to 3rd in the standings now. Massive win in the Derby, and a statement from Lazio with that victory. Are we not talking about Lazio enough? We seem to be talking about every other team but Lazio.
No, I think they've flown in under the radar, which is good for them, because I think there was, great expectation on Sarri to immediately sort of stamp his Sarri ball blueprint all over that team. And I think what we're actually seeing now is sort of a revised version of Sarri ball. And I think, that's something that a lot of people were wondering if he was even capable of. Quite clearly, he's mastered being a little bit more pragmatic. I don't think that takes away from what was a very disappointing and flat performance from Roma, don't get me wrong. But it feels like, Lazio now, I mean, especially, without Ciro Immobile, they're learning how, and there was no Milinkovic-Savic either for this game, of course. So, 2 key elements out of that Lazio side, and they still managed to come away with a really important win, more important than, than usual, given that it was in the derby as well. But I think for me, Roma, they feel toothless at this moment in time. Every time we've talked about them in recent podcasts, it just, they're not quite getting the chances to score the goals that they need. And I think we talked about Tammy Abraham having gone something like, I don't know, what was it, 9-10 games without a goal a couple of weeks ago. And, those are worrying times, especially when you're, in the absence of a Dybala, you're relying on somebody like a Zaniolo, who's always quite injury prone, and Pellegrini, who I think maybe scored his first domestic goal in a full calendar year quite recently, if I'm not mistaken. So it kind of does feel like obviously it's a huge victory for Lazio, but also that's a massive, defeat for Mourinho and Roma. And I don't know if it's me, but I just kind of feel like that competitive Mourinho Roma, which I expected to really kick on this season, has not quite come into being just yet. I don't know how you feel about that, looking at the table.
Well, I think that what you're witnessing is teams like Rome, Lazio, and other teams who are competing in Europe as well just simply don't have the depth enough to be able to compete every 3 days. I mean, that's what the schedule is giving these players right now. And it was a lot of tired legs, tired performances that I saw from many teams who had competed in Europe this midweek, and now going back into domestic action, it was no different for Rome. What surprised me more than anything, JJ, was the fact that their own fans started sort of whistling and booing when they didn't see the passion, they didn't see the energy, they didn't see the commitment. I mean, this is a derby game. And then for large periods of this game, Lazio were just pinging this ball around. And the Paramount Plus team were talking about this as well on their post-game show. It's unusual to see that in a Rome derby, that your fans would get against you. And I've certainly experienced it in a derby game, played in the Hamburg derby in particular, where, if your fans will get pretty pissed off if you're not getting stuck in. Even if you're not winning the game, and you're not, dominating the game in any way, if you just give up and you allow the opposition to enjoy possession without showing a bit of heart, without showing a bit of fight, the fans will turn against you very quickly in a derby game, and it makes it an uphill battle. So I'm not really surprised to see a disappointing performance from Roma on the day. They just didn't have it. But Lazio surprised me, and maybe it's because Michael Lahoud did not pick them to win this game this weekend, the fact that they actually went on and picked up all 3 points. But a huge win for them. Let's move on to Atalanta against Napoli. Big game, obviously, coming into the weekend. We were really looking forward to seeing how Napoli would perform. They didn't have Kvaratskhelia in their lineup, but they still got the job done, JJ. Lookman opened the scoring with a fantastic penalty kick, by the way, for Atalanta, 90 minutes in. Top Ben, 6th league goal for him, 5 goals in the last 6 games. He really looks like he's found a home, JJ. Then Osimhen took over. 23 minutes in, he scored 4 goals in his last 3 games, 9th all competitions. Remember, he's been injured for a large period of that. And Elmas with his first goal since August, assisted by Osimhen to wrap things up in the first half. And that was all she wrote. Napoli get the victory without Kvaradona. Pretty good performance, I would say, from Napoli all around. And they look the real deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've raved and waxed lyrical about Napoli, so many times already this season. But I think what's probably most encouraging about this is it's proof that this Napoli side can get results without one of their key men, because we know the value of Osimhen, we know the value of Kvaradona as well. So to see them get the win there with just one of those two star men, turning up and performing is encouraging. I don't know what it would look like if Napoli lost both of them, but fingers crossed for them that doesn't happen at any point. And it goes back to the sort of the debate about the winter break as well during the World Cup. Napoli, they just have this momentum right now, and I think it's that momentum which we saw carry them in this match. They fell behind early on, but they're in this really hot streak at the moment. Yes, I know that they lost to Liverpool in the Champions League in the last round of games, but that was kind of the wake-up call that we were discussing after those games that they needed. And suddenly they got another wake-up call here with Atalanta, one of the better sides in the league so far this season, taking the lead. And they showed that they were up to the challenge. So I think Napoli have passed, the first kind of test point of their season. And as long as they don't do anything silly now leading into that World Cup break, I think they're going to be really well positioned. And I mean, I'm going to bring it back to that break and make and put a question to you. Do you think that the experience of having that time off is going to lead some of these leagues to potentially adopt that kind of winter style break that we've seen in Germany? Because if it works out for somebody like Napoli and they manage to keep their players fresh, there's going to be a lot of leagues that look at it and think, well, maybe this is a way that we can keep some of our clubs a bit more competitive, especially those who are sort of starting to suffer, in the UEFA coefficient.
Yeah, I think the question is, how can you keep your players healthy? Because what we're witnessing right now is the schedule's it's ridiculous for these players. I mean, you're seeing so many injuries now leading up to World Cup. Players are trying to obviously compete domestically for their club teams. And then you're also trying to keep yourself fit for your national team going into World Cup. It's a bit crazy right now. But all the competitions that are being thrown at these players, is anyone even asking the players like how they're even managing to cope with this? Like, this is a business right now. We're witnessing a business. People are making money off these players playing 60, 70 games a season and not thinking for a fact, by the way, we're just going to treat these players as science projects rather than human beings. It's absolutely insane. And I'll be honest with you, JJ, like, I was never a player that could keep healthy. I had a lot of injuries. I had a bad knee injury when I first started playing, but I had a lot of injuries, a lot of hamstring injuries, a lot of muscle tears, all this type of shit that just kept coming my way. I cannot even begin to imagine someone who can play 50, 60, 70 games a season for club and for country. Nowadays, these players are asked to do that 5, 6, 7 years in a row. If you're a good player nowadays, you're playing 7, 8, 900 games in your career. It's absolutely insane, the numbers that are being thrown at these players. So I think they have to start to adopt a break in the season for players to be able to recuperate so that we don't get serious injury from some of the world's best players. We have criticized, and you could obviously look at the Bundesliga taking this big break. I think it's fantastic for the players. I used to love it. Mentally, I used to be able to switch off from football. Physically, you used to be able to recuperate. You did a small preseason, and away you go again. So, yeah, it's really interesting to me. I got some stats on you for Osimhen, but do you have a comment on that there about the break again?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting seeing that kind of observation coming in. I can understand why people point to the Premier League and they find it great because they're home with their families at Christmas, get to tune in for some football while eating some great food and being surrounded by families. Yeah, I understand that. But I think there has to be some, sort of like underlying logic to it, and an acknowledgement that these guys are also, human beings, need that same time with their family, time to switch off, time to rest, recuperate. And I think maybe there is sort of a logical in between, because we mentioned France earlier, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily the best example, but there is technically a winter break normally, in years when you don't have a World Cup slap bang in the middle of the season, where the league games stop for about 2-3 weeks. You do have a round of domestic cup games, but they got rid of one of the domestic cups, the League Cup, because they felt it was just cramming the schedule too much, making it too heavy at the beginning of each year in January, where teams would be playing every sort of 2 or 3 days just off the back of that sort of 2 to 3 week break. So I do think that there is, perhaps a fine balance to be struck. But yes, those financial arguments, are always going to be extremely strong, especially when you've got something like Boxing Day, which is just ingrained, in the British footballing culture. If I went home for Christmas to spend time with my family. And we said on Boxing Day, what's on TV? There's no football. I think, there'd be a mini crisis. It's unthinkable, but perhaps for the good of the sport, at some point there is going to have to come a period of reflection where, okay, if not for Boxing Day and Christmas, there has to be some time where you can give those players a break. I mean, it is particularly unforgiving, though, as you said earlier, to expect them to go straight back into the thick of it, just after a World Cup. It does feel like we're getting close to sort of like a potential breaking point.
A few stats from Osimhen's performance this weekend and also his career in Serie A. 60 games in Serie A, 32 goals, 7 assists. He has now scored more Serie A goals than any other Nigerian player in the competition's history. Napoli, top of Serie A, obviously heading to ahead of Milan, who won thanks to Giroud with a fantastic finish, by the way. I text you immediately because that finish was sensational from Giroud to win the game. Napoli against Empoli and Udinese, both at home before that World Cup break, so certainly in favor of Napoli.
One thing I will add as well about Serie A is when we've been digging through Inter's results here, looking at Roma's as well. If you look at those teams just outside of the European positions, Roma and Inter sort of hanging on by dear life there on the very edge of the European qualification zones. Very few draws. They either win games or they lose games. They absolutely need to learn to take at least a point from those kind of matches. Roma against Lazio being a prime example. You're up against a Lazio. Not only they're your bitter rivals, you're playing at home, but they're without two of their star players. You have to be taking at least a point there and learning how to grind out those points again. And I felt Roma mastered that fairly well towards the end of last season, but they kind of seem to have forgotten that. And I think if Inter and Roma are to really stay, in the reckoning for potential Champions League qualification, they absolutely need to learn how to master that.
That's a great point. And it's also as if teams and coaches need to try and master what is happening to them right now with this ridiculous schedule that's been thrown at them, trying to figure out how to do this. This is the first time we've ever had a World Cup in the mid-season. It's the first time the European schedule, competitive schedule, has been as compact as it is. So they've got to try and figure a way to be able to keep themselves composed, make sure they go into games and not necessarily just lose games. You got to try and get a point from some of these games, which is massively important. And keeping your head sometimes is also very important when it comes to team selection, discipline, and whatever it may be. Now, as we turn our attention to La Liga, keeping the head was certainly something that was completely lacking, as Matt Osmond has pointed out right here in the comments. He just said the Sevilla derby was absolutely insane. 3 red cards. And you're right, Matt. Betis Sevilla finished 1-1. Navas with the own goal. It was absolutely ridiculous, the own goal. I thought Banu should have done so much better. And then Goodell in the 81st minute, after playing against 9 men for such a long period of time with 10 men, Sevilla eventually got their goal. 3 red cards in the game. Mad game. The first half was absolutely insane. Referee kept on going back to video review. Referee kept on producing these red cards. Overall thoughts on the game? I mean, forget the result. I mean, this was just madness, right?
Yeah, it was madness, and it was, great to watch it unfolding. It's a shame we had to come on air, before the game finished to see the way that it played out. Obviously gutting for me of a Betis persuasion that Sevilla managed to get the goal, but when those kind of circumstances unfold, it becomes a game that neither side can afford to lose. When you're in that, the heat of the derby, you cannot, like Betis knew, being ahead, but also having 2 men sent off, they knew that if they conceded 1 goal, the chances were high that they would probably concede another and go on to lose. Unthinkable in front of your own fans against your bitter rivals, but also Sevilla, to have been 1 man better off for sort of best part of half an hour at least, and then finally managing to get the breakthrough just at the end. They'll feel like that was the absolute least that they could have done. And I do think it was a great spectacle. Really probably the fairest result. Overall, but at the same time, it must feel like an opportunity missed for Betis, because it's so galling to concede in those kind of circumstances so late on, but also how sweet it would have been for them as well to see Jesus Navas potentially score the only goal of the game, an own goal, the real symbol of Sevilla. That would have absolutely, rubbed salt into the wounds. But, I do still think that, Betis are definitely one of the better positioned teams, to push to qualify for the Champions League as a surprise contender. The only thing I worry about for them at this moment in time is, you lose Fekir, you lose Iglesias to suspension. You're arguably your best creative player, your best goal scorer, suddenly having them out, they go to Valencia next. That could get kind of tricky. But I wanted to ask you, Sampaoli, we've seen him now. He's getting his feet back under the table with Sevilla. Okay, you could argue maybe he should have done better in one or two situations since he's come back in. But generally speaking, there seem to be signs of life again to this Sevilla side. Not perhaps, the same level that we've been used to having Sevilla over the last couple of years, but sort of better than we've seen from them so far this season.
Yeah, definitely. And they're scoring goals again and also giving themselves an opportunity to be involved in every game. And okay, the wins aren't consistently coming for them just yet. But I've talked about it so many times, just having someone with that type of passion on the sidelines. And today was a great example. It's a derby game and people like him got to be very careful to remain cool, to remain composed. He was marching up and down, left and right like he does in his technical area, trying to keep composed. But when you're playing against 9 men with 10 men, there's already been 3 red cards. It's hard to remain composed. You're 1-0 down in a game, and he was absolutely going nuts, trying to get his team back into the game, trying to get his team to just like go crazy. He had this Castore tracksuit in, as producer Des is mentioning to us in our private chat. He had this blue Castore tracksuit, just, with a hoodie, just walking back and forth. He looked like an animal, but he was someone who was
thinks he's still in Marseille.
Probably, yeah. Yeah. But it was just, I think it's a great environment for him to be in. You can tell there's a respect from the players to him. And today, even though tactically it goes out the window very quickly with the red cards, and especially when red cards happen in the first half in derby games, tactically you have to just remain in games. He did do very quickly, got a favourable decision. I thought the Fekir elbow was a bit silly from Fekir. He shouldn't have done that, even though I'm not sure it was 100% a red card. It was close. But certainly a video review had no hesitation in producing it ahead of halftime, and then it's an interesting second half. But Sevilla, they play counter-attacking football very good. They love to defend. They love to attack quickly. And they get a lot of opportunities in front of goal. And if you look at them playing against 9 men with 10 men, they had tons of chances to potentially go on and win that game, and they just really didn't put themselves to bed there. But in the end, it finished 1-1 in Derby, and I'd have to say, JJ, it was probably a fair result in the end because Betis deserves something from the game. Sevilla deserves something from the game in the end. Goodell's absolute stunner tied things up on the 81st minute. Other fixtures in La Liga, Barcelona 2-0 against Almeria. Gerard Piqué retires from football emotionally. We'll touch on him real quickly before we go to break. Atletico Madrid 1, Espanyol 1. Atleti playing against 10 men for 62 minutes in this game. Just ridiculous. And then, of course, Real Madrid play on Monday. But real quickly, as we run things up in La Liga before we go to break, anything from Gerard Piqué there and Atleti's miserable performance against 10?
Well, Atleti, I don't think we're surprised about it. Certainly not judging by our comments, our back and forth in the chat over the weekend. I think it was a miracle in itself that João Felix managed to get the game time to get himself a goal. But, for Piqué, yeah, I mean, I think that some players are guilty of overstaying, not necessarily their welcome, but, sort of trying to prolong their career when the signs have been telling them for a while that, perhaps it was better to hang up their boots. I think that message finally got through to Gerard Piqué. Better late than never. Not trying to be too harsh on him. I think that the signs were already there that the game was passing him by back, a couple of years ago when you had Mbappe absolutely roasting him, and PSG racked up a big win at Camp Nou. And, I don't think... I think a lot of how people will recall Piqué will probably be linked with what Barca are now and what they've become in the last couple of years. But let's not forget he was part of a phenomenal, Barca side under Pep Guardiola back in sort of, 2008 time. The kids that came through as the academy graduates. I know that he went off to United and then came back to Barcelona. But, the homegrown talents that really form the core of that team. Because I think the only one left now is Busquets. And again, Busquets is sort of in that territory as well that Piqué was in that I mentioned earlier. So, credit to him for what he achieved over his career, not just with Barca, but also for his country as well. World Cup and European champion with Spain. And they were a phenomenal national team back at that point in time as well. So, credit to him. But I think it's the right decision for him to call it a day at this moment.
Couple of quick comments before we head to break here. Rafa says, Piqué planning for the future. Good PR move to leave now instead of seeing out that monster contract. Certainly a big PR move when it comes to how much money Barcelona will save on the contract now being gone.
Yeah, I mean,
Great
it should be pointed out as well that I think he opted to renounce any remaining money from that contract, which, you know, is a big gesture, but like Rafa said, you know, could well be sort of coming with an angle as well, because we know how much Barca have riding on these next couple of years.
Yeah, especially when you're going through a divorce, JJ. Let me tell you that. Not easy to go through divorce when you're giving away money.
You know what? The obvious reaction when PK reacted was, so that's the lengths he'd go to not have to wear the Shakira special shirt from Spotify.
I absolutely love it. I'm out of here. All right, we're out here as well. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll have a look at the rest of the fixtures from the Premier League. It was an absolute mind-blowing week in the Premier League. Some crazy fixtures, some crazy results. You're watching House of Champions. We'll be right back.
Italy's greatest soccer.
Is there anything this man can't do?
Europe's most exciting title race.
And there's the goal!
The battle for the Scudetto is on. Stream every Serie A match live, exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, you're watching House of Champions. If you're looking for a month free Paramount Plus action, P Plus have a 1 month free trial. Offer code UEFA22. Scan the QR code on the screen or follow the link in the description to get your 1 month free of Paramount Plus action. A lot to look forward to on Paramount Plus. So many football rights, great soccer action. And of course, you're welcome back to House of Champions. It's Ian Joy alongside Jonathan Johnson. A few comments coming in already. Thank you to everybody out there who's been tuning in. Lee Ferry, Arsenal with a Jamaican flag right next to it there. Let's get on to the Gunners against Chelsea in the Premier League. Gabriel with the winning goal in the game, JJ. Arsenal now have won 3 consecutive Premier League away games against Chelsea for the first time in the competition's history. Pretty incredible performance. It was a really interesting game. It was a tight game. But at the end of the day, I'd have to say Arsenal were probably justified of the 3 points, right?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think it's really impressive what Mikel Arteta has managed to forge, you know, with this Arsenal side. And I do think that they were deserving winners at the end of the day. I mean, I actually think that this result tells us a bit more about Chelsea than it does Arsenal. We know that Arsenal, you know, are one of the teams setting the pace in the Premier League now, definitely one of the best organized with the clearest identity. Chelsea don't really have any of that at this moment in time under Graham Potter. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of knee-jerk reactions, people saying, you know, oh, Potter's out of his depth, you know, our players don't know what they're doing. It's going to take time, you know, to get Chelsea into a position where they can have the same, you know, sort of setup that Arsenal have at this moment in time. Arteta has taken, you know, years really, you know, to really bring his ideas to fruition. And yes, you know, Thomas Tuchel had, you know, some good, clear, strong ideas. But then since the takeover, you know, all of that has been thrown out of the window. It's essentially, you know, a new club, certainly a new team, you know, and I think, you know, for people to expect Graham Potter to just come in and instantly, you know, take Chelsea back up to the top of the table and have them, you know, dominating all of their opponents, it's just not going to happen. I think, you know, Chelsea did well here to only lose it by a goal, you know, for it to not, you know, get embarrassing, because I think the gulf between the two at this moment in time is much bigger than that scoreline suggests. I don't know if you would agree with that, but for me, I feel like Chelsea are not ready to compete, you know, with teams like Arsenal, with teams like Manchester City at this moment in time. And, you know, they look like they're being passed by the likes of a Newcastle. I mean, Tottenham were looking good until a couple of weeks ago as well. For me, it feels like Chelsea are quite far off the pace at this moment in time, but also, you know, that Potter needs to be given the necessary time, you know, to put his methods into place.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You can actually see that gap. And this game in particular showed that it could have been more for Arsenal. And I don't want to criticize Chelsea too much because they were well in this game. And in many ways, there was a good bit of fight and a good bit of desire from players. They created some decent chances. Oba was in my opinion, pretty poor in this game. Up top, they really struggled. Chelsea, there was no real power. There was no real danger really for Arsenal to worry about. On the goal in particular, you got to say it was a good finish from Gabriel. I know it took a little deflection on its way in there. Second goal of the season for him. But Saka with the assist here, a little stat I pulled up here. Only Kevin De Bruyne, who has 9, has registered more assists than Bukayo Saka, who has 6 in the Premier League this season.
Well, I'm glad that you're getting the constructive stats in here, because what we have to put up with in the House of Champions chat group is just James Bench trotting out all these stats about how Saka has become the most fouled player in the Premier League. I'm glad that we're looking at other aspects of his game and not just how the brutal treatment he's being handed each week.
He certainly is one player that gets fouled a lot in the game. He also gave it a little bit in the derby today, and that's what I want to see from a derby game. Arsenal back to the top of the Prem, Brighton up next for them in the Cup, and then at Wolves next weekend before that winter break. We've already discussed a little bit about Chelsea. If any fans out there who are watching would like to leave a comment about Chelsea, please let us know. SSB28, welcome to the show. Good to see you. One thing that has impressed me this season is Arsenal's midfield. Partey and Xhaka have really surprised me, and I think they've surprised all of us. But that goes back to what you were talking about earlier on, JJ, about Arteta being given time and being able to give these players some consistency to be able to work it out and make sure they get it right. If he believes in you, you're going to eventually get the best performance from these players. And Partey in particular, I know what Xhaka can do. I've seen him already in the Bundesliga. I've seen him throughout his career get better and better. He's an experienced player now. But Partey in particular, I think he's taken his game to the next level.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think that Partey is extremely, lucky that Arsenal and Arteta have stood by him, especially with everything that's been going on away from the pitch. But if we're talking purely about what he brings on the pitch, yes, obviously he has emerged as a really key figure for this Arsenal side at this moment in time. And I think as well, what has started to really impress me, because you've noticed it sort of in the Europa League as well, is the balance now that this squad has, the ability for Arteta to chop and change one or two pieces and more or less get the same kind of performances coming out of his players. I still think they maybe need that strength in depth in terms of a goal threat. But, generally speaking, across the board, it is a pretty, tightly run and well-oiled team at this moment in time. Whether or not they have the staying power to outlast a City, realistically, I think they're pulling ahead of everybody else. So it's just going to be between them and City at this moment in time. We don't know what, the World Cup, will do to some of these teams. But at this moment in time, sure, it is really beautiful to see, what Arsenal and Arteta have managed to create. And you do wonder just how long they can keep this, this run going.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they actually do perform when they come back after the World Cup. Both of these teams, obviously, Chelsea in particular, I want to see them improve. Just wonder, obviously, how much time do you give a Graham Potter to get it right? How much money do you give him to spend in the transfer window? What do they do with the players who are going to be out of contract? Fabrizio Romano's been talking about that a lot on our interviews that we've been doing every single week. Go back and watch them on YouTube if you're out there and want to find out what he's been saying about Chelsea. But for Arsenal in particular, what they do off the field to bring these types of players into the locker room to improve, to get better, and then see this type of reaction from the players. You can tell the chemistry is on point. Arteta is getting it right. Let's move on to Spurs against Liverpool. JJ, this was a big game, big performance from Liverpool. Salah got a couple of goals in this game, and Harry Kane obviously pulled one back and made it very interesting towards the later stages in this game. Liverpool unbeaten in their last 112 Premier League games when they were leading at halftime, a stat I didn't want to forget mentioning to you coming on the show. First one on the road for Liverpool this season. Statement performance, statement victory, even though Tottenham made it interesting in the end.
Yeah, they did. I think this has the potential to give Liverpool something to build on and move on with. I think in many ways, if they manage to win, I think they've got an EFL Cup game against Derby, and then they finish up with maybe Southampton. No, or is it Forest they play? Anyway, they've got an EFL Cup game, and then they've got, I think Southampton before the break for the World Cup. And if Liverpool do manage to win both of those games, they'll go into the break, having built up a bit of momentum. I think that's quite important because it'll take a bit of the pressure off, because we've been, discussing sort of Klopp's future in recent weeks. Whether the players are able to handle, his demands these days. Some of those players will obviously be able to get a rest. But also, I think Klopp will be able to sit back, really truly analyze, get into the thick of it, with regards to, what can be improved moving forward to the second half of the season. They can perhaps draw up some list of potential targets to come in and strengthen the squad. But in terms of sort of turning around their form immediately, that's a key result for them in terms of their top four ambitions. Really big blow for Spurs, especially given the way that they've been usurped in third place in recent weeks. Newcastle now up there after today's results. But, I do think that, Liverpool have always, certainly, this season, they've shown at times that they can take those steps forward with positive performance and results, and then they find some way of undoing it. If they don't do that this time, then yeah, this is definitely something to build on. But I'm I'm curious to know what you make of the Spurs situation at the moment, because it really feels like, they're in this kind of sticky patch at this moment in time. They've started to lose a
Big
couple of
time.
games, drop points. But I felt that Kulusevski, came on, immediately got the assist for Harry Kane. They're without Son at this moment in time, and probably will be until the World Cup break. How big a boost is it having somebody like Kulusevski back? Because he does bring that creativity that, let's face it, Spurs are really missing at this moment in time. There's some really unimaginative performances we've seen from Conte's men in recent weeks.
Yeah, great question. Listen, we got a lot of comments coming in as well, JJ. SSB28 Conte needs to get Spurs to start quicker. He needs to start game attacking. Now, Kulusevski absolutely helps that. I mean, it took him, a minute and 21 seconds, something like that, to get his mark in this game. But they need that. It's almost as if they need to be a bit more dynamic more than anything else, Spurs. They're a little bit frustrating for me. But I guess the bigger question, or the biggest talking point for me, would be about Conte against the big teams, the big six, so to say, in the Premier League. Seems to struggle. I went back and had a look at some of the results, and lost against Liverpool, lost against Man United, lost against Arsenal, drew against Chelsea. Now, these are big games that Tottenham, if they want to be taken seriously as a contender year in, year out for a top four finish, and potentially challenge for a title at some point, these are big games. You've got to start getting results. And the question I would have to ask at the end of the day is, Conte that type of coach? Can he actually get this team to start winning those games? Is he the man, or does he just kind of struggle against top six teams where you win the other games and you put yourself in contention for a top four finish? But when it comes to these big games, Tottenham looked a little bit off it until the second half.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good observation, because you can say the same about Conte in Europe as well. I mean, Conte, yes, he's led them to top spot in the Champions League group, but that group was so chaotic. Spurs weren't even sure that they were through into the latter stage of the Champions League until the last kick of their game. So it's kind of a bit of a futile argument there. But there is definitely, some credence in, Conte not necessarily getting the best out of Spurs and getting the results against the top teams, yet he continues to appeal sort of publicly to Spurs to put more and more money into his project. So, I think there will come a time where, Spurs have to ask, enough is enough. How much more do you really think that we're realistically going to be able to give you before you're able to compete with this Spurs side? And it does kind of almost feel like an excuse that kind of gets trotted out whenever Spurs don't get the win, that the team is not strong enough, when, perhaps, as we were just discussing here, the setup, could be designed so that Spurs are actually a bit more positive, a bit more proactive, and actually look to get themselves on the front foot, rather than, reacting to what their opponents are doing and, sort of almost sitting with their foot half on the off of the gas sometimes.
JJ, this question is for you from Rafa. What do you guys think about Darwin Núñez? A lot of people dismiss him, but I think he could develop into a world-class player. I mean, he's shown that ahead of his move to Liverpool, had an unfortunate, although stupid red card early on in his Liverpool career, now showing flashes of what he really has. I mean, this kid has unbelievable potential.
Yeah, he does. And we saw that last season in the Champions League with Benfica as well. There's a reason why Liverpool were prepared to stump up the money that they paid for him. Whether it was the best decision sort of strategically in terms of the position that needed strengthening, we can debate that. But, was Núñez's potential clear? Yes, absolutely it was. And I think as well, it's a question of the culture shock. He's come from, playing in a country that's not too dissimilar, to his home country of Uruguay, to somewhere where it's completely different. Yes, he doesn't shy away from the physical aspect of the Premier League match, but to really properly bed in, to really truly find his feet, sometimes that can take the best part of a season, and the fact that even though he's not able to score, he's chipping in with assists here. I think that's really important not only for Klopp and for Liverpool, but also for Núñez himself in sort of feeling part of this Liverpool setup. And I think, the team will continue to evolve, and in the future, it'll be built more around getting the best out of Núñez. But, while those changes are happening and being put into place, he just needs to keep contributing. And if he can't get a goal, getting an assist is the next best thing, I think.
I know we're absolutely extending this show, and producer Des wants to get on to the next game and get out of here pretty quickly.
I want to get on to the next game.
I want to just ask you real quickly about Darwin Núñez. Is there any part of his game that reminds you of a player that you've watched so closely in Edinson Cavani? Any part of his game similar?
There's a lot of similarities. You just look at the appearance and it immediately shouts, sort of Cavani 2.0 in many ways. But no, I mean, I think the one thing that so many of the Uruguayan players have that, we saw them get the best out of that. You saw I mean, that's what I meant by the appearance when you look at him at, first glance. But, I think one of the things that Tabarez, really succeeded with for a long time with that Uruguayan side is the fact that they have that determination, that grit, that sort of never say die attitude. And Nunez, yes, I mean, it sort of has manifested itself in a bit of aggro so far this season, but he does have that character. He's not somebody who's going to shy away. He is somebody who is very expressive in terms of the way that he plays, but also in terms of the personality that he is. And I think if you harness that right, as Klopp, I think will eventually do because he's a very good manager. I think that Nunez, that there are a lot of similarities with Cavani, and let's not forget, Cavani had to be refined, had to be shaped over a number of years. He had always been a brilliant predator, somebody capable of putting the ball in the back of the net, but he had to learn to add different aspects to his game before he became arguably one of the most complete strikers in the European game at some point. And I think as well, there are some lessons that Nunez can learn from Cavani because unfortunately, we see Cavani's body failing him now. I think there's very little opportunity for him to make it to the 2024 World Cup. When I see his body falling apart while he's playing for Valencia, it's been very stop-start for him since he left PSG. And if Nunez can sort of, learn to sort of listen to his body, not sort of push it to its limits as Cavani did back in 2018. And of course he did it, putting his body on the line for his country, so you have to respect that. But if Nunez can pay attention to those sort of things, perhaps he will be able to enjoy a bit more longevity than Cavani, because Cavani, as brilliant as he was only at the very, very top for a short period of time. Compared to his talent, he should arguably have been one of the leading strikers in Europe for sort of a 5 to 7 year stretch.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so does Rafa. He says 100%. SSB says Nunez and Cavani move similar off the ball in movement, the way he drifts to the side. I just see a lot of similarities, and I'm glad I brought up that question. That was a phenomenal answer right there. Let's get to your Villa. Villa got a massive win against Manchester United. I'm sure it put a big smile on your face. In fact, I know it put a smile on your face. What a great goal it was from Bailey to open the score. And there it is. Two in his last 3 games.
Having to get the shirt out for Nigel Reo-Coker. Honestly, absolutely delighted, on cloud nine. I mean, everything that you'd want from an opening fixture under a new manager, we got it with Villa. It was
reaction.
I mean, where to start? I mean, it was just brilliant. Everything that had been lacking under Steven Gerrard, and also in the second of those 2 games under interim management of Aaron Danks as well. Yep. Villa had a plan, a way that they wanted to approach the match. Yes, they made a superb start, but the players, you could see the motivation and, just how positive they responded to being put into, Nigel, observed it in the chat, just very basic formations and shapes. Yet, when your players are responding to that kind of thing, it's pretty damning for Steven Gerrard, obviously, who Unai Emery has replaced, but also it suggests that there is a lot more potential in this squad than many people thought. And Unai Emery sees that and has identified a way to tap into it. Now, Villa aren't going to be performing like that week in, week out and beating teams of Man United's quality 3-1. We can also argue that United weren't at the races. Certainly some very poor aspects of their match today. But, to be able to get a match performance like that out of this Villa side that, they thumped Brentford recently 4-0, but then they went and got absolutely tonked by Newcastle as well. So to see them put in that kind of performance, fantastic. First time in 27 years, I think, that we've beaten Man United at home, even scoring direct free kick goals now. Really, really fantastic performance. Delighted for the boys. And, for once, it feels really good to be a Villa fan after a match. And there's not been that often that I've been saying that in the last few months.
I had to bring this statistic up for you because I was excited for this conversation. I knew you'd be passionate about the way that Villa played. And, I grew up a Manchester United fan, so this result kind of hurt me in many ways. And my father in particular was pretty pissed off with that United performance. But I just loved what Villa produced out there. This is the statistic that stood out to me. Jacob Ramsey is the 4th player in Premier League history with a goal, an assist, and an own goal in a single Premier League match right there. But I thought his final finish to wrap things up was the bow on a performance which was absolutely fantastic. They gave everything they had, and the finishing was very, very good today. And you could tell one thing in particular, the fans were all in on that game. It was pretty special to watch.
Yeah, it was, and I think the players will thrive on that energy moving forward. It really gives them something to build upon. Kind of a little concerned about what the sort of, backlash will be when Villa face United again on Thursday in the EFL Cup, because in my opinion, until we get higher up the table, I'd love to think that we can do something similar to Newcastle last season, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. I still think that the domestic cups are probably the best route into Europe for Villa this season. And, I know people will be saying, oh, Villa, maybe they're getting ahead of themselves thinking about Europe, but that's been the goal now for the last 2 seasons. And I think Emery being brought in is definitely a reflection of the fact that that's where Villa have identified that they want to go, but they feel they're capable of going. So I think now, there certainly has to be a focus on those domestic cup games, and United being the only one before the World Cup break, that's going to be of huge importance. But the fans, that will buoy them. That will give Emery and the players something to work with, and the players will feel good after that kind of performance as well. I'm glad you singled out Ramsey. I'm a really, really big fan of his. It's always great to see what we can produce through the youth academy. So to see a player of his quality coming through, it really feels like it's only a matter of time before he's regularly playing for England at senior level, or at least I hope it's only a matter of time. But I think he got a bit unlucky as well with the own goal. And I kind of feel that even flattered United on the day, because as good as Villa were, and, for once we were very, very good and impressive, United were really, really disappointing. And I remember Mike Lahoud, before the game got underway, was kind of surprised to see that the lineup was pretty much the same one that played in Europe a couple of days before on the Thursday. So, perhaps that's an indication of the fact that Ten Hag, maybe has his, he has a bit of a kind of preference for certain players, and he's really, really trying to get something out of players that he's not necessarily going to be able to extract. And obviously within that point, I'm referring to this continued effort to try and get something out of Cristiano Ronaldo, which just quite clearly is not there with United. I mean, do you disagree?
No, I agree with you. And I also found it a little interesting to see Cristiano obviously getting into a bit of a scrap with Tyrone Mings as well. It made absolutely no sense. Ronaldo was the captain today in the lineup there. Some great comments coming in from Matt talking about Coutinho being left out of the squad, which was a big statement as well. Stevie G never got that type of performance out of those players. And I think all around, yeah, you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, no matter what Manchester United do, and to the talking point of relying on players, I think coaches who come into a new team do that. When you get wins and you get good performances, you have a tendency to lean to the same 11 that you're getting results from, even though these players are being asked a lot of right now. So great win for Villa, great win for Unai Emery. What a great start for him, and nice to see that smile on your face. Let's have a look at the other fixtures that took place this weekend in the Premier League. West Ham went down by 2-1 Crystal Palace. Olise scoring a goal in the 94th minute of that game for Palace to pick up a massive 3 points. Erling Haaland on the score sheet, last minute winner for Manchester City against Fulham, obviously down by a man for a large period of that game. Everton going down by 2-1 against Leicester City. Top performance from Leicester. Really impressed with their performance. And Tielemans went an absolute banger into the top corner. Loved that goal. Jesse Marsch, delight. 4-3 victory over Bournemouth. It was amazing to see this type of comeback from Jesse Marsch's side. Don't know how long you can keep doing that, though, in the Premier League. That is for sure. But this was a big win for Leeds United. Back-to-back victories. And Southampton go down by 4-1 to Newcastle. Hasenhüttl. The rumor is that he's been fired. I'm not sure, JJ, if you can confirm or not that he has been fired. Newcastle moving to third place. Newcastle have won the last 4 games, undefeated in the last 9. Almiron, 7 goals in his last 7, scored in 4 consecutive games. Final thoughts before we get the hell out of here, JJ?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to throw it over to you because I know how much you wanted to rave about that MLS Cup final over the weekend. I mean, I was paying attention to it from afar, checking out all the goals. I was pretty surprised by the number of headed goals, but I know that there's been a lot of positive feedback about it being the best MLS Cup final of all time. And it didn't disappoint in terms of talking points. Well, it didn't disappoint up until the penalty shootout. The penalty shootout, I'll be honest with you, was pretty butt cheeks.
Listen, it was a good final, and many people are calling this the best MLS game ever. I was at MLS Cup final watching my NYCFC lift the trophy, and that to me was the greatest final I've ever seen because I was supporting my team lifting the trophy. So it will always be the greatest final, being the first one for the club. However, this was one of the most incredible games I've ever seen. Full stop. Forget about MLS. This was just a wild game. It had everything. It had everything from like crazy goals, injuries, penalty kicks. It was just wild. The fans played a big role in that game as well. Celebrations, as you can see, Gareth Bale scored in the 128th minute to take it to penalty kicks. I mean, this game had absolutely everything.
Is it me? Bale going really great there.
He's going great, whether you like it or not. I mean, he's got a little shave, a little fade going on the side of his head here, but he definitely looks like he's got the grey hair going now. He's getting older now. But what a great goal that was, though, JJ. I know you saw the goals. Great goal from Gareth Bale, and an important goal for him because this is him probably leaving Major League Soccer, going to a World Cup now as an MLS Cup champion, scoring a big goal like that for the club. He goes down as an icon at LAFC now.
He does, but I'm kind of curious to know more how you will retain your thoughts of Denis Bouanga, because Bouanga for me is somebody who's always had a lot of talent in Ligue 1. Didn't always show it consistently, but I know he was voted man of the match in this game as well. So I was quite happy for LAFC from that point of view because obviously he's a Ligue 1 product, so going on and enjoying success elsewhere is great. But yeah, Bale, you know that he's going to turn up in the big matches. It's what he does in some of the other games, how motivated you can keep him. That will always dictate sort of, how fond your memories will be of Gareth Bale at your club.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Anyway, listen, we're going to get out of here. JJ, we've spoken way too much, and that's what happens when me and you get together on our own. We always seem to go overboard. We're at 55 minutes when we were told to keep it under 45, but it's been absolutely fantastic chatting with you, just wrapping things up for the weekend. Don't forget, everybody out there, we will have live coverage of the Champions League draw. The group House of Champions will be together very early in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning Eastern. So make sure if you want to join the family, join in the conversation while we all watch the draw together, please feel free to jump on board with us. JJ, I don't know, are you joining that show?
Yeah, I'll be joining in at some point and trying to live blog it at the same time. So I'm sure it'll be a glorious mess. But just looking forward to my shouts of rage when PSG get drawn against Real Madrid or a Man City again.
I look forward to it, my friend. Great stuff as always. Thank you to you. Thank you to everybody else out there for listening to House of Champions. Please take a minute to leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else you listen to your podcast. We're also available as video, so subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks to everybody out there for joining in the show, leaving your comments, supporting myself and JJ. JJ, get some sleep, bon nuit. Thanks so much as always, brother.
No, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure. And catch you bright and early tomorrow.
See everybody tomorrow, 6 a.m. Eastern for the Champions League draw. See you then.